Good morning, everybody. My name's Paul Welburn, and this is Faith Baptist Church Sunday School. We are continuing our look at Joseph in the Bible, and we are going to be looking at Genesis chapter 45. And there's been a lot of things that's happened since the last lesson. So we looked at Joseph and how he had told Pharaoh, you had this weird dream, and these skinny cows ate up these fat cows, and basically what the interpretation was, there's going to be 7 years of great blessings and abundance, and then there was going to be 7 years of great famine in the area. And so Joseph was appointed to make sure that grain was in all the places and all the cities in Egypt, and that everything was set so that whenever the 7 years of famine happened, that everybody would be set. And so sure enough, so that 7 years of abundance, they stored up grain so they would be prepared during the great famine that was going to happen. And so God blessed Egypt through Joseph. Joseph had favor. Now, in the area, if you guys know geography as far as Egypt and Israel, you had Joseph's brothers and his family and his father that were still over in what we would know as the land of Israel. At this time, it was not named Israel, it's basically Canaan land. But his brothers and family were there in that nearby region, and they were being affected by the famine as well. They had not prepared, they were starving. And so between Genesis chapter 41 that we looked at last week and Genesis chapter 45 that we're going to look at today, it's windy out here, there was, the brothers came to Egypt to basically get food. They heard that there had been food. Jacob told the brothers, hey, Egypt is well prepared, so go check it out. And so the brothers showed up. They did not recognize Joseph, and they said, we need some food. And all of them came except for Benjamin. And Joseph noticed, and he said, are you guys here to spy on the land? Aren't there more of you? And they said, well, one of the brothers died, or is no longer with us, and they were referring to Joseph. And then they said, the youngest we left back home. Now, Benjamin and Joseph were blood brothers from the same mother, Rachel. The other boys were from Leah. Rachel was the favored wife from Jacob. And so Jacob didn't want Benjamin to get in harm, and so he kept Benjamin back. And so you kind of see that pattern where Jacob favored the children of Rachel. So anyway, it's interesting. They were there. The brothers were in Egypt. They came in front of Joseph, and they said, please give us some food. They did not recognize Joseph. And Joseph recognized them, and it had been probably 10 years at this point, maybe 11 years. A lot can happen, especially whenever the last time they saw Joseph, he was 17. He was in his late 20s, probably nearly 30 years old. So yeah, a lot can happen. People can change as far as their appearance. Plus, Joseph being in the land of Egypt, he had basically became an Egyptian. He stayed true to God, but he dressed and probably looked a lot like the Egyptians there in the culture. So they really did not recognize him. So then there's some back and forth, and Joseph says, all right, come back, bring Benjamin, and let me see. And so he gave them some grain the first time. They came back and got some more grain. Joseph still did not tell him who he was, and so he put a silver chalice in one of the grain baskets that Benjamin had so that they could basically come back, and he wasn't sure kind of what to do really at this point. And so supposedly, Benjamin, they find the chalice in Benjamin's grain basket or bag, and they bring the brothers back, and they are basically in front of Joseph, and they are thinking, oh no, Benjamin is taken something, or somebody is framing Benjamin. Here we are, this Egyptian guy is angry with us, and we are far away from home. So that's the setting now. So Genesis chapter 45, verses 1 through 3. So Joseph could no longer keep his composure in front of his attendants. So he called out, send everyone away from me. So he cleared out the court. No one was with him when he revealed his identity to his brothers, but he wept loudly, so the Egyptians heard it. They could hear it through the door. And also Pharaoh's household heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But they could not answer him because they were terrified in his presence. They probably thought, he seems really familiar. The other night, I went and got some food over at Archdale Subs, and I saw somebody in there I went to high school with, and it's been a long time since I went to high school with folks. And it's funny when you see somebody in their facial structure and you're thinking, I know that person. And so at Archsell Subs, they always call out the name whenever the food order is ready. And so they called out this person's name. And that's whenever I was kind of like, hey. And I think they were thinking the same thing about me. I mean, I look a little bit different than I did in high school. And so that amount of time with Joseph and his brothers, they thought, gosh, that person looks familiar. But they didn't, in their wildest dreams, ever imagine the brother that they had sold to the Ishmaelites, that they had thrown into the pit, that he would end up in Egypt, because they probably did not know where he ended up. They just knew the Ishmaelites had him. He could have ended up anywhere, Babylon or whatever, but he ended up in Egypt. And they were thinking, okay, and the next thoughts were, the last thing we remember of him is we had cast him into a pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites. And so Genesis 45, 4-5, Joseph is the second in command of all of Egypt. He has a lot of power. He can basically do anything he wants to at this moment. The brothers are helpless. He is in control. And Joseph said to his brothers, please come near me. And they came near. And he says, I'm Joseph, your brother. And he said, the one you sold into Egypt. And they're like, yeah. And now don't be grieved or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. At that moment, Joseph reflected on what had been happening in the land. He knew there had been a great famine. God had sent him there in Egypt. He had had all these things happen. Potiphar's house, Potiphar's crazy wife, there in the prison, the baker, the cupbearer, all these dreams and different things. And he was now in second in command in Egypt, and he was placed all over all the land, and he had helped preserve life in Egypt, and he knew he could do the same also for his brothers and family and those that are there still in Canaan land. And so in that time, we think about ourselves. A lot of times we tend to be very selfish. I'm an only child. Everybody lives in my world. You know, that's one of the things I've had to struggle with for me all my life. And putting the needs of others or the bigger picture in front of others is something that really has to cause you to step back. Just yesterday, the industry that I'm in, I work with other groups. I'm not just alone as far as the business where I'm at. And so we work with other healthcare organizations inside our one group. And one of the other healthcare organizations is needing some help. And basically what I'm going to need to do is send some business from what I'm doing to them so that they can see patients and people where they're at. And so I had to kind of step back and think, okay, you know, this may affect me as far as my work, and I may not be getting in as much volume or whatever. And I don't know if you guys are in an industry where, you know, you see things or have to produce things or whatever. But I had to think, okay, bigger picture is we're all one organization working together. And so I had to kind of step back. And that was just yesterday. Had that conversation. So Genesis chapter 45, 9-11, return quickly to my father and say to him, this is what your son Joseph says, God has made me Lord of all of Egypt. Come down to me without delay. You can settle in the land of Goshen, and be near me, you, your children, your grandchildren, your flocks, your herds, and all you have. There I will sustain you, for there will be 5 more years of famine. So this is basically 2 years into the famine. Otherwise, you, your household, and everything you have will become destitute. In other words, you guys are all going to die. So Joseph had to tell his brothers, and remember all this back and forth, them going back to Canaan land and coming back and then bringing Benjamin, and Benjamin being kind of basically held captive, that sort of thing. Joseph now is saying, everybody relocate over here. Egypt has plenty of resources. I can take care of you. The people of Egypt can take care of you. What's interesting, long term, like hundreds of years later, the people of the Hebrew people would become slaves to the people of Egypt and basically help build pyramids and things like that and be held captive. And then you would have Moses with the Exodus. But that's for another story. Next week, we will continue looking at, and we will wrap up the study of Joseph, because at this point, the brothers are going to have to go back home, tell their dad, hey, Joseph is alive. We lied to you all these years ago, and it's basically now come to light that, wow, he's still alive. And so we will pick back up with that, Genesis chapter 50, next week. Thanks for joining. Hope everybody has a great week ahead. We'll see you.